lot of people who end up being successful anywhere, but especially in Silicon Valley, need to remember the role that luck played in their outcome. And so, yes, PayPal ended up being a spectacular business. Clearly, it was part of the result of the management team that enabled that. But man, we had a couple of near-death experiences along the way.
Yeah.
And I nearly could have joined something else. I nearly could have gone back to McKinsey, or I could have joined Goldman Sachs instead, the 2 other job offers I had. Everybody else turned me down. I actually had lunch today with a GSP classmate. And I just remembered at this lunch that Perry Capital, TPG, like all these different hedge funds that I applied to, all these different private equity firms that I applied to, every single one that I interviewed at turned me down. And so I didn't have that many options, honestly, when I got out of the GSP. So, but you make good long-term decisions. So this is, in terms of, I guess many of your audience members may have heard of the Marshmallow Test or the Marshmallow experiments that were run at Stanford University.
On children?
Yeah, the big nursery school, they ran these experiments in the 1970s. Are you familiar with them?
Where there's a marshmallow, kids have to wait to eat them?
Correct. So the kids are given a choice. And if you go to Bing Nursery School, my kids actually were at Bing when they were younger. They still have these rooms that have the one-way mirrors, and you can see experiments being conducted. And so that particular experiment was, here's a marshmallow. I'm going to leave for 15 minutes. If I come back, you can have a second one. So it's a test on delayed gratification. And about a third of the children delayed gratification and got the second marshmallow. And one of the professors who conducted the experiments, his own child was in there. And later on, when she finished high school, he started to notice patterns and went back to look at the data. And it turned out that the children who delayed gratification and waited for that second marshmallow had better grades, went to better colleges, had lower divorce rates, sort of a bunch of other variables that fell into place by people who understood the value of delayed gratification. And by the way, a common tactic that worked was distraction. So the children who just kept on staring at this delicious marshmallow just always caved.
Sure.
And those who found a book to read or a toy and distracted themselves with something else did. So a lot of good decisions happen when you delay gratification. So when I finished my undergraduate, I qualified as an actuary in South Africa. I took a 50% pay cut to become a business analyst at McKinsey, because I thought that would be a springboard to a different type of career and an opportunity to work internationally, even though it was a 50% pay cut from what I would otherwise have been earning. When I decided to go to PayPal instead of returning to McKinsey, I had to repay the tuition that McKinsey had paid for me to go to school. And I got paid, as I said, $75,000 instead of whatever the salary at McKinsey had been at the time. But I felt it was the better long-term business decision or career decision to do that. And then similarly, when I joined Sequoia, it was after PayPal had been acquired by eBay. And I was offered the position to be the CFO of PayPal with a very generous equity package. Sequoia offered to match my salary from PayPal with no profit share or equity or carried interest in any of the funds. It was just, you've got to prove yourself. And so I made that decision again, which worked out in the end, but it was clearly a suboptimal decision over the subsequent 2 or 3 year time frame if you measured it over that time frame. And so the idea is to have a longer time span of discretion, to look much further down the road. So when as I mentioned, I studied actuarial science, and the professor of actuarial science always said that actuaries are trained to think 30 years into the future, when accountants are trained to think a year in arrears. And I've brought that to a lot of how we invest at Sequoia, which is, just dreaming and imagining what would happen if this company succeeds. Because we invest in these very raw early stage companies. And, a company like Natera that we backed when they were, in 2007 with $1 million seed investment. Today it's a $1 billion revenue public company that's changed the face of diagnostics and maternal health. When we first invested in YouTube, and there were 3 people with an idea and a website that had 9,000 users. You worked at LinkedIn. Reed and I were colleagues at PayPal. When Sequoia was the Series A investor in LinkedIn, there were 7 people in the company, and they had 21,000 registered users. Today they have over 200 million probably. And so you have to dream very long term and very big to imagine, how might this kernel of an idea, this kernel of a company, this very early stage startup, how might they flourish down the road? And what are the paths that it may take along the way?